2022 at 6 p.m. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Pels? Here. Commissioner Glasscott? Absent. Commissioner Shreve?
Here.
Commissioner Kling?
Present.
Vice Chairman Garrison?
Present.
Chairwoman Maston?
Present. I must have made a mistake in my notes.
The phone's echoing.
What?
The phone's echoing.
Oh. Should we try?
I had to mute my video screen. I'm all good now.
Okay. So everyone's present?
Glasscott.
Glasscott's. So Glasscott's absent.
Correct.
Sorry, I'm all moved off. All right, very good. For the next order of business, we need to approve the minutes for our last meeting on February 28, 2022. Do any of the commissioners have any corrections or additions? No? Commissioner Shreve, any corrections or additions?
Sorry, I'm having trouble with your audio.
Oh. Any corrections or additions to the minutes?
No.
Thank you. Vice Chairman, oh, wow.
Move to approve.
All right. Approved, and it appears that Commissioner Glasscott is now present. All right. Sorry, everyone. I got all bamboozled. Really quick. On the minutes, all in favor? Aye. Aye. All right. Unanimously carried. Sorry about that. We are now back on track. Our next order of business is informational reports and updates. Do we have any informational reports and updates for the city?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Commission. Good evening. Just a couple things. If you didn't get the message yet, there has been some email issues with the city email accounts. So if you cannot get in there, we do have a couple members of IT that are here. But reach out to us or them and then get you set back up for getting logged back in. Just to let the commission know, we have a annexation hearing on April 5th with City Council for some state parks annexations that we're looking at doing, provide potentially in the future additional river access, several different locations. We can show you the maps if you come into the office or get them online. If you want us to email them to you, we can do that as well. Again, that meeting is April 5th. City Council meeting at 6 o'clock. I do want...
Up a little bit, please. I can't hardly hear him. I'm sorry.
It's not working.
Do we have volume? The other thing I would like to remind the commissioners to please speak into your microphone. You do have to push the button to do so. This is being recorded. We want everybody to be able to hear it and have the recordings pick it up. And that is all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The next order is call to the public. Would anyone in the public like to address the commission on an item not on the agenda already tonight? All right, I don't see anyone, so we will move on. We don't have any old business this evening, so we're going to move on to new business. Our first item is Conditional Use Permit 22-002, a request for a conditional use permit for a transitional housing project at 1089 South State Route 260.
Thank you, Chairwoman Maston, members of the Commission. As you stated, this is a conditional use permit 22-002. It is for a request to convert an existing 32-unit existing 32-unit hotel into a transitional housing apartment complex. This is located on the northeast side of State Route 260, near the intersection with Main Street. The owner is Pine Hotels, and the current zoning is C2, which is a heavy commercial zoning. That is the same zoning as on all sides of the property. Presently, as I stated, there is a 32-room hotel that was constructed in 3 phases in 1983, 86, and 93. Some exterior renovations were done to the site, adding some stairwells, bringing landscaping up to code, and that all occurred in 2019. This is a site plan. It is positioned true north there, a little bit at an angle. As you can see, there's one main drive aisle accessing from Highway 260, going along the north side of the property. There's a trash enclosure located to the rear of the property here. All the parking along the north side, and the 2-story hotel complex along the south side of the property. This is what you would see if you're on Highway 260 looking at the property. Little different angle of the same view. And looking down the driveway as you would access the property from 260. This is looking at the property from the rear. And this is the adjacent property, a little business complex on the north side. It's a fast food restaurant to the south side. And vacant agricultural property behind to the east. And a large commercial shopping complex across Highway 260 from the property. A couple of things about the site and the changes that they are making. The current hotel rooms are basically just what they are. They will be adding small little kitchenettes to make these more of a small efficiency studio type unit that would be self-contained for the tenants. No changes are being proposed to the exterior of the building since those modifications were done fairly recently. The current site shows 37 parking spaces. If we were to look at a new apartment complex such as this to come in today, we would require them to have 41 spaces. There is no additional area on site. Additional spaces can be provided. There is a section of the code that the Community Development Director does have the authority to, in situations like this, adjust that requirement. And so it would, with their request to approve this plan with 37 spaces. We also looked at certain conditions where they're located. They are on a bus route. There's major employment base around them, a lot of walking possibilities. In addition to all of these being efficiency units, our code would require 1.2 parking spaces per unit. Because of the transitional nature of the complex. Not everybody may have vehicles, and so there was sort of a cumulative reason that staff felt that was justifiable. As I stated, some of the improvements that were done in 2019 did bring some additional landscaping and brought that up to code. So we're not looking at any exterior building modifications or site modifications to the property. So with that, that's all I have to comment on. I'm available for any questions, and we also have a representative from Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona here this evening as well.
Thank you very much. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for staff? Go ahead. Right there.
In regards to it being hotel currently and the trash, if you're going to have people living there on a regular basis, is the trash going to be different in the back where it's going to be a larger area, or how's that going to operate?
The one trash location that was at the rear of the property there. There are no plans presented to change that.
Yeah, don't you think if people are going to live there long-term, it might need more trash?
I hadn't really considered that aspect of the additional trash. I would suppose, as with any apartment complex, if it became an issue, there is location. They can add either a larger dumpster, increase the frequency of the time it would be more dumped.
Commissioner Kling, any questions?
No, the only thing I was wondering is laundry. So I'm guessing there's something on site for the linens. Is the other option laundromat, or is there any changes proposed for residents to use?
Could I refer that question when
Yeah,
the
that might be better
CEO
for the
comes
applicant.
up as to the specific site?
Commissioner Shreve, do you have any questions for staff?
Yes, I had a question regarding the use change. We're going from a hotel to a transitional property where people may stay a certain length of time. Does the applicant have a protocol to how issues may arise that could affect the people in the surrounding area? I think that we have different levels of people who are transitioning, and in the event that there was an incident, is there a protocol in place so that we can be assured that the public is going to be protected from the use change?
Commissioner Shreve, I think that question might be better for the applicant. Can we hold it? Do Commissioner Peltz or Vice Chair have any questions for the staff?
No, I'm fine.
So I do. I can't tell whether my mic's on or not because the light doesn't work. There's a lot of signage on this building. Is that all going away as part of this permit?
There hasn't been any signage proposed for the new use. I would imagine that there would be a name to the complex proposed. Like any sign permit, they will have limitations of allowable square footage based on their frontage.
And I'll respectfully disagree. I think Commissioner Shreve's question was actually appropriate for staff. This is transitional housing, so what does transitional mean?
Transitional in this sense is for people experiencing homelessness. This is not a court-ordered or a correctional housing. It is for somebody who is currently housing challenged, and that these efficiency type units fill a need for the transition between homelessness to a more stable, larger apartment.
So does the city have a definition of that and what that means for length of time? Because last meeting we proposed or we approved the homeless shelter, adding a house that was also transitional housing.
Correct.
What do we have on our books for some type of a definition of what transitional actually means? Is there a time limit? So is there an expectation that people are going to be here for an extended period of time? I guess that's the bulk of my question.
We have a definition in our code for correctional transitional housing, and this is not that
So why are
aspect.
we-
This is an apartment complex.
So why are we calling it transitional if we don't have a definition for transition? So, should we not be making a definition for transitional if we're going to start proposing transitional?
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, the city's not going to get involved in policing how long people stay at a facility like this. That's not something that we want to consider doing or control doing. It is up to the developer or applicant owner of these places to determine what that transition means, what that looks like. If they want people in there for extended periods to help them get back on their feet so they can save money, get out on their own, that's up to them. We're not going to get involved with that.
So shouldn't we be calling these apartments then, not transitional? Because transitional leads you to believe it's a short-term nature, and that's not what we're doing here, if I'm understanding our current code. We're changing this from short-term to shorter, longer term.
Mr. Vice Chair, we're proposing it to you as it was proposed to us. We don't get into the different types of names like that based on how long somebody's going to stay there.
I'm going to take a moment to interject. The way that I perceive this project, and I think that the way that the city is understanding it, is that it is a, hopefully this is the best word to use, a humanitarian project that is being managed outside, like the city's obviously approving it, but it's being managed outside the city, and that they want to allow that management to make those decisions about how these transitions are taking place. And we can think of this as a form of ultra affordable housing, which I know that we as a commission have discussed at some length in many other meetings. And I think that it is best to leave this open-ended. I think treating this as something that we need to litigate, it puts, it's not really what the Planning and Zoning Commission should be in charge of. It's not our area of expertise.
But it is. So here's the problem is we have an applicant asking to turn a property from very short term, which is 1 or 2 nights, possibly longer, into something that could be a year, and turn this into apartments. And this is not a good location for apartments. This is a good location for a hotel. So if we don't have a definition of what short-term is or what transitional is, then what we're basically being asked to do is turn this property into an apartment complex, and that isn't a good location for apartment complex. Right on 260, right in the middle of the commercial area, commercial district. So I see it as 2 different things, and if we can't define what transient is or what short-term is, then we're basically being asked, according to staff, to turn this into an apartment complex, and that's not an appropriate place for an apartment complex, regardless of the people that are going to be in it. I understand exactly what you're saying, but this isn't a good location for long-term housing.
Is there some sort of plan from the developers that they have a plan to transition them from temporary to permanent?
I will let her get into, more of the details of her operation and how they,
But here's the problem, is we don't have a definition. So they can say whatever they want, but we have no way to back up making them actually follow through with whatever they say they want to do with this or they're going to do with it, because we don't have any type of a transitional definition.
I will say, for my part, I'm really interested in what the applicant has to say before we go further. And I think that a lot of these questions, while I can understand a point of view where we want to ask them of staff, and I understand wanting a city definition for some of these terms, I think that trying to keep, we're now hitting a talking in circles point. So I think it's time to have the applicant come forward.
Thanks. So let me introduce Devonna McLaughlin. She is the CEO of Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona.
Thank you. Welcome. Please introduce yourself into the mic.
Sure. Thank you for letting me come chat with you guys tonight. My name is Devonna McLaughlin, and I have the honor of serving as the CEO of Housing Solutions of Northern Arizona. We're a nonprofit housing organization serving Coconino, Yavapai, and Mojave counties to provide affordable housing. Oh, and there's light.
Yeah,
It's nice to see you.
nice to see you.
Yeah. Did you want me to address specific questions, or?
Why don't you go ahead? I mean, I feel like you just got a number of questions, and I will give the commissioners an opportunity to ask you more.
Okay, so if I could start with a quick overview, if that's okay, of what we're proposing to do. The Arizona Department of Housing received grant funds from the federal government for recovery, ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act money. One of the things that they're investing in is housing, which is great. So this is kind of a one-time opportunity to get federal funds to create affordable housing in rural Arizona. There's a request for proposals that's been issued by the Department of Housing for $40 million, and it's specifically to convert hotels to housing. That's the name of it. 30 million of those dollars have to serve rural Arizona, which is amazing because that never happens. So we're excited about this opportunity. And what it is it's recognizing that folks who are experiencing homelessness have been significantly impacted by the pandemic, right? So housing is healthcare. It's hard to socially distance in communal settings, and trying to get folks into their own spaces, longer term housing to connect to permanent housing. So the grant itself requires either emergency shelter or transitional housing for a compliance period of 5 years. Transitional housing by definition is up to 24 months of housing and the wraparound support services to help folks transition into permanent housing. So we are proposing, as we've done for the last 23 years in Flagstaff with our Sharon Manor Transitional Housing Complex, to create transitional housing at this site, we would sign year-long leases. So I know one of the questions is how long, right? What we found with folks who have trauma, experienced homelessness, substance abuse issues, or mental health challenges is that stability is key. And so when we can provide safe, decent, and affordable housing for 12 months, then they have stability and they know where they're sleeping tomorrow and where they're waking up the next day. And so then we can start working on other issues. We can work on increasing income, we can work on employment, we can work on connecting to community resources, we can work on connecting to mental health services and how we connect people to our social safety net so that they can then transition into permanent housing. That's the goal. So we would sign a 12-month lease, which we can renew because we said it's up to 24 months. So we're not emergency shelter. We're not 60 days. We're not 90 days. That term transitional kind of is a little ambiguous, as you guys discussed. But that federal definition, according to the grant that we're applying for, is up to 24 months. So that's our intention. We are partnering with Catholic Charities to do on-site case management. We'll provide on-site food support. There's transportation nearby, public transportation. There's employment nearby, which is awesome. There's banking nearby. There's food nearby. So it actually is a good location that's close to amenities for folks who might have some transportation challenges. We think it's a good site. We think it's an awesome opportunity, and we're excited to move forward with this project. We have submitted our application to the Arizona Department of Housing pending zoning approval to bring the financing into Cottonwood for acquisition and for rehab. So the money will pay for the purchase and then the additions of kitchenettes to each unit, so there'll be independent studios for the most part. There's a couple one bedrooms and one 2-bedroom unit. And then we'll also add sprinklers to the building because that's important. And we'll add ADA accessibility as well. So the site as it looks now will predominantly look like it looks now. We're not proposing any significant site plan changes. They're really interior changes to make the units more functional. As far as impact to neighbors, I would say there's probably little impact to neighbors. This is not a day center, it's not a drop-in center, it's not a hangout place. People who are there live there, they have a reason to be on property, they have a unit to go into. They might stay outside and have a picnic or hang out a little bit, as we all do near our locations of residence, but it's not a place for gathering. It's not a place for folks to just come for services if they don't already live there or they're not applying for housing to live there. So as we've seen in our other transitional housing projects, really nobody much knows they're there, quite frankly. There's not a huge impact to the neighboring properties or the neighboring businesses. So that's our proposal for this site.
And I just want to give Commissioner Shreve an opportunity to reiterate his earlier question about safety. I think that you did touch on it, but I just want to let him know that we hear him, and if he wants to rephrase that or address that, now's an opportunity. if we have
Lost
signal.
audio.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, we missed that?
Now you're back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I started out asking about a protocol in place because I think we have different levels of people who are in transitional housing, so to speak. We have the people who lost their job and they had a medical emergency and they're down on their luck and they can't make their rent and they became homeless. I believe that we should be supporting the homeless people and finding a way in the city of Cottonwood to help people any way we can, all levels of homeless people. But I also believe that within transitional homeless individuals, there are different levels of homeless that may need more care and more supervision. And my concern would be, as Commissioner Garrison brought up, that we're in the smack dab in the middle of our retail and our first impression area when we come into Cottonwood. We need hotel rooms, and we're going to turn this into housing. And I agree with Commissioner Garrison. I don't think this is the right location for that project. So the question back to you is, what protocol, what kind of screening, what kind of security measures are presented to the city to rest assured that we're not going to have an issue with somebody at McDonald's in the parking lot, or we're not going to have an issue with someone?
I think I got that, yeah. So as far as our protocols for leasing up, typically what we'll do is we'll take referrals from your social service homeless providers right now. We're not going to recreate the wheel. We're going to work in partnership. So folks will get referred to our site when we have an opening. We'll do an interview and screening. We'll go over rules and talk about expectations in the lease agreement. And then rent. We're going to charge rent. It's based on income, but we do want folks to pay rent because then they start building a good rental history and they get an opportunity to interact in a landlord-tenant environment, so that way we can do a referral to them moving into permanent housing. It's part of learning how to be a good tenant. The lease is pretty extensive and it's pretty typical, right? So you have to follow the rules. Like, you can't be a bad neighbor, right? You can't disturb your neighbors or the neighbor businesses. You have to pay your rent. You can't destroy the unit. If you follow those rules, you get to stay in your unit. We hope you engage in services. We follow a housing first model, which is best practices, that resources are provided. The tenant gets to select what resources and access to help they want. But if you don't follow the rules, if you don't pay your rent, if you destroy the unit, and if you are a nuisance to your neighbor or you're doing other things, then it's a violation of your lease. And under Arizona landlord-tenant law, you get a notice that says you got to correct it. And if you don't correct it, then we move forward with eviction. So there are protections in place for the tenant. We can't just kick someone out willy-nilly. We don't want to, it's against the law. But there are protections in place for us as the landlord as well that says if those things are happening where you're not paying rent or you're disturbing the peace or you're destroying the unit or causing damage, then we can move forward with an eviction process. Does everyone who lives in our sites be magically wonderful, happy, lovely people? No. The vast majority are wonderful folks that really appreciate the affordable housing, living with dignity and respect, and having decent housing. And then when it doesn't work out, when there are lease violations, we move forward as we're allowed to under law. Okay. And we've also talked in a pre-application meeting with your police department about, engaging in the good neighbor program, so that if folks are on property who shouldn't be there, they could be trespassed. We'll have cameras on site so we can pay attention to what the heck's going on, and have that documentation for court proceedings if we need it. That's impartial, third party, can't argue that the camera saw you, damaging something. And so we typically don't see a lot of need for those, but we have those in place because if we need them, we want to have them. So we would of course partner with PD as well as making sure that we follow landlord-tenant laws if people aren't following the rules or are damaging property.
All right, I'm going to give the rest of the commissioners more opportunities to ask you specific questions.
Madam Chair,
Oh.
if I can interrupt, something was said, and Ron Corbin, Cottonwood City Manager.
Yes.
I think it's imperative that I clear something that was said. The city does not value hotels over housing. And so if there's an option between housing and hotels, it's housing for the city of Cottonwood. Our housing shortage in the city of Cottonwood is extreme at all levels. The National Forest is getting ready to clamp down on overnight camping in the National Forest, which is pushing people out. There's a lot of working homeless folks. Now, I don't know who her clientele will be. I just know it'll provide another opportunity. The number one complaint I get from employers inside the city of Cottonwood is no housing for their employees. They can't hire employees. They can't find housing here. Again, I don't know if this is their solution. It's just another solution in our options, in our variety, from high-end housing at Mesquite Hills or upper end to apartments to all these different options. But the city of Cottonwood does not choose hotels over housing for our employees. I just want to make that very clear.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Glasscott.
When you say number of occupants per room, you said is there a specific limit on the number of occupants? And you did mention that some of them potentially will have issues, as most homeless might have, of substance abuse and mental issues. Is there something you do to address those concerns?
So first, yes, we would set occupancy standards. So in a studio, it's 2 people. It could be a parent and a child. It could be 2 people. In a 1-bedroom, there's 2 1-bedrooms on site. It would be 3 people. And then in the 2-bedroom, it's 2 people per bedroom, so it's 4. So we wouldn't have 5 people in a room, or overcrowding in that sense. As far as connection to resources, that's the first thing, right? So if folks come in and they identify that they've got barriers to permanent housing and stability, then what we found with transitional housing, the best resource is to connect folks to existing community resources, so when they move out, they still have that connection. We don't have the money, quite frankly, or we can't be everything to everybody, but what we can do is navigate folks to those existing community resources. And then that way, when they leave us, they still have them, right? So if they're connected to mental health resources, they still have their counselor. If they know how to ride public transportation, they still know how to ride public transportation. Childcare is a big barrier for a lot of folks. So how do we get folks connected to DES childcare vouchers and get folks to reliable and safe childcare? Employment's another one. Right now, there's more jobs than there are people, but that's not always the case. And so how do we help people do resumes, job searches, and get into employment that is stable for them, that can provide a livable wage?
Lady.
So yes, so that's the goal of that housing case manager navigator, is to connect folks to resources and then to work with them to identify permanent housing. I also forgot to say something. The goal of the grant is to provide initial transitional housing to help folks experiencing homelessness for 5 years. That doesn't sound like a long period of time for an investment from the feds. So the Department of Housing was actually pretty savvy in requiring long-term affordability. So we have to commit, if we get the grant funds for purchase and rehab, to 40 years of affordability. After 5 years, we can convert some of those units to permanent units. So it does provide more of an apartment-style facility, but it provides now permanent housing options, and we don't necessarily have to serve just households experiencing homelessness. It adds to the affordable housing inventory for an extended period of time. So we promise 40 years because we kind of have to, but it's also the mission of our organization to provide affordable housing. So I would argue that you're going to get affordable housing for longer than 40 years.
Commissioner Kling, do you have any questions?
Not questions, more comments. I'll say yes.
Okay. Commissioner Shreve, did you have further questions? Okay. Commissioner Peltz, do you have questions for the applicant?
I have one. Is this kind of like a Section 8 format that you're following for housing?
So it's not actually. So Section 8 is a federally run rental assistance program, and Section 8 provides permanent housing vouchers. So under the Section 8 model, a client would apply to typically a housing authority. In your area, it's the state running the Section 8 voucher program, and they get on a list, and when they get to the top of the list, they get a voucher. And then that tenant takes that voucher to the private market and says to this rental place, this rental place, this rental place, I want to apply for housing. And if they get a unit, then they pay a portion of their income towards rent, and the remainder is paid by that voucher. So that's a different program, quite frankly, that provides permanent housing, and it's really tenant-based, like the client-based, not a property-specific program. We will accept Section 8 vouchers at this property because the Department of Housing already asked me that, quite frankly, and I said, yeah, why wouldn't we? So we will accept Section 8 vouchers, and if we do, then we have to sign a 12-month lease, so that's convenient. But you don't have to have a Section 8 voucher to live here. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Vice Chairman Garrison, do you have further questions?
Yeah, I'm just not gonna let this go, I'm sorry. You know, I understand what you're doing, and I appreciate that there are organizations out there that are doing exactly what you're doing. And it sounds like you're not only providing housing, but services that go along with the housing to help people get that next step forward and take care of some old business and move forward with what they're doing and clean up a bad situation and make it better. But as the city manager, Mr. Corbin, pointed out, you know, the city doesn't differentiate how it uses property and how it looks at hotels versus residential, but we do. That's our job. And part of our mission here is to enforce zoning. And so when the city sets up its master plan, it decides this area gets commercial, this area gets residential, this area gets high density residential, this area gets industrial. And so when this corridor was created, it was created as a commercial corridor. It wasn't created as multifamily. And although I appreciate what you're doing, I don't like the idea of putting multifamily right in the middle of a commercial district, especially right on a highway. And if we were looking at, so one of the ways I always look at this when somebody's asking for a change in zoning is, regardless of the use that's currently there, if you were to come in and say, I want to build an apartment complex on that bare lot, would that be something that I would approve of? And that wouldn't be something I would approve of. So it's hard for me to approve of you changing a current use into a future use that doesn't fit in with the parameters of the neighborhood that was created around that property. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I love what you're doing, and we absolutely need housing, regardless of what level of housing, whether that's low income or any kind of housing. We can't get people here to fill the jobs we have because we have no housing at any level. But we have to look at, as Mr. Corbin brought up, the highest and best use of the property. And I don't think the highest and best use of a piece of commercial property right on the highway is residential. I just don't. So while I approve of what you're doing, I don't like the long-term residential aspect of the project. But I appreciate what you're doing. Do you have any of these projects in Flagstaff right on Route 66?
Actually, we do. So we were able to use the first round of federal funding to buy a 44-unit motel complex in Flagstaff that we're currently rehabbing for this use right now. The nice thing about Flagstaff, quite frankly, is I could do it without a conditional use permit. So I didn't have to go through this process. It was allowed by right to do transitional housing in their commercial zoning district. The other thing I would ask you, because I don't know your code as well as I know Flagstaff's. In Flagstaff, if you're in a commercial zoning district, you can put residential above or behind commercial by right. So you already have some residential and commercial zoning districts. And I don't know if that's allowed in your existing C2 zoning district or not, but that could be a way to get residential into commercial, which might not be the use you want.
We have mixed use in the town, but we don't have it nearly as much as it needs to be, and it tends to be more restricted where it's at. So Old Town is one of those areas where that is. So like I said, I like what you're doing. I really do. I wish you were taking over the View Motel or one of the other places that were off of the main corridor. that wasn't right where you're at. You're right in the middle of everything. And to me, that just isn't for the residents as well as the residents of the town and the visitors we have coming in an appropriate place for long-term housing. That's my
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, the C2 zone, which is where this is at, heavy commercial, does allow residential with the highest density of R3 with the conditional use permit. So you can have residential subject to that conditional use permit in these zones.
Aren't these funds like recent types of funds that have become available? Like this is a newer concept of converting hotels to transitional type of housing, correct?
It is. So what's happened, unfortunately, during the pandemic is some of the communal shelters really needed to either social distance and move people out, or people who were medically frail couldn't be in a congregate setting because it put them at risk of getting COVID. So what we've seen shelters do across the nation is start renting hotel rooms to put people in, because it was a way to socially distance and to provide folks an opportunity to quarantine if they were exposed or had COVID, or if they were medically frail to get out of that congregate setting. So it really brought to light the connection between housing and healthcare, right? If you don't have housing, you're at greater risk of getting diseases such as COVID and everything else that's communicable. And so when that started happening, people were spending millions of dollars to rent hotel rooms to keep people safe and healthy. And so that model has now shifted so that federal funds are actually being encouraged to convert hotels into housing, which is kind of ironic because our housing is being converted to hotels with VRBOs, but it is a way of getting higher density housing, rehabbing existing structures because it's faster than building new, quite frankly, and you're usually getting them in higher density corridors where you have public transportation, you have amenities, and you can provide on-site services. So this is a one-time shot. The Department of Housing has this grant out. If we can't get zoning verification, then we will pull our application. And that, quite frankly, is the truth. So we would see if we can do it again somewhere else. We've been successful, as I've said, in Flagstaff. I know Flagstaff Shelter Services is doing the same thing on another property in Flagstaff. So there's 2 properties being converted in Flagstaff right now on Route 66.
If all of the commissioners have asked their questions, at this point, I feel like I personally do not have any further questions for you. However, I do have some comments, which I'm going to hold until the very end. I'm going to go ahead and make a call to the public to see if there's anyone here who wants to speak for or against this project.
Can I just say thank you real quick?
Thank you. Have you filled out a form? No. Could you please? They should be right back there by the door. And then bring it to the front and introduce yourself in the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa. First off, I want to say I do agree with you. Something needs to be done to help out the homeless. A lot of people are moving here because of our climate. I have heard from other law enforcements that people are coming down from Tri-City areas. They're coming up from Phoenix because we do have the climate. We are a little bit spread out. However, a couple of questions. My first one is they talked about having children on this property. Is there a playground? Where are these kids gonna play? So that was one question. It is a very busy area over there, so I would be concerned with children being out in the parking lot. McDonald's is not too far away. We've all seen what it's like there early in the morning. The other concern I have as a property owner is the trash. We own the property behind there. Right now, we are dealing with a ton of trash. We are dealing with homelessness that is camped out in tents or under bushes. They are coming down in our wash. We're having to clean up the mess. We have had numerous phone calls that we have had to make to both the Cottonwood Police Department and county. In fact, I just had to make a 911 call Sunday night for somebody that was trespassing and got very belligerent with family members on our property. So we are experiencing these issues. We've also had a lot of theft involved. So who's going to control this? Because right now, between Cottonwood Police Department and the Sheriff's Department, their hands are tied with a lot of this. They are understaffed. The guy that was out there that came out on Sunday night, he could not spend a lot of time because he had already gotten a call to go out to Rimrock because they were short-staffed. What we're finding is that these people are trespassing, they're on drugs, alcohol, something. We have filled out the proper paperwork. They are supposed to be getting help. They're supposed to be going to court to show up for different hearings. None of this is happening. They may get arrested and put in jail. They're there for a very short time, then they're back out on the streets and they're back down on our property. Who's going to handle that?
Well, I can't speak for the applicant, but I would imagine that if people have a place to go and live, that there will be less of them in the wash.
Who's going to keep them out of that wash? Who's going to keep them off of our property?
I believe that is the PD, yeah. I think the sheriff, the county, yeah.
We are in the county, but we also have property in the city. So like I said, we've contacted both and they don't know what to do. Their hands are tied. So if their hands are tied right now, what's going to happen if this goes further?
Per the direction, I think you have an on-site manager, is that correct? We will. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's a step.
I think what it comes down to is that obviously any housing, they can only control to the extent of their residence. So no one can promise what will happen on your property. And it's just not something that we're able to do. But just general logic dictates that if there are more facilities to help mitigate homelessness in the immediate area, it will have an impact and help mitigate homelessness.
And I understand that. However, I do not feel that this is the best location for this to be taking place, nor does the rest of the family members that own the property behind there.
And this is
I'm speaking on behalf of the Mangini family.
okay.
Madam Chair, Commission, these are questions that the Commission doesn't have control over, so we need to continue on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is anyone else in the public like to make any comments or have any questions? All right, I see that there are not. All right, so with that said, I'm going to give the commissioners, I know that everyone's kind of, at this point, shared most of their opinions, but if there are any further opinions, and then I'm going to sum up my thoughts at the end. Commissioner Glassett? No question. Okay. Commissioner Kling? Comments? Comments.
I do understand the concerns of the fellow commissioners, the location. I have a child, so that is a busy street. I can see the issue with, traffic, not having to park. We're in a situation where we didn't have a park in our community either, and there's so many around town. Traffic, while it is a concern, living in a vehicle, living in a tent would be more of a concern. I don't know if we're not able to move forward with this location. I think, it really comes down to where. Because while it is first impression, we're seeing panhandling, we're seeing shopping carts in areas that we weren't, we're seeing through traffic trash in areas that weren't this way 6 months ago, a year ago. At least it is something, and from what I understand, people, they're renting these rooms or rooms around town for housing anyway. So regardless of whether this is approved or not, you're still going to have that potentially. We can look at other sites, but it's really what sellers are willing to cooperate with, the funds that are given. We have things going on in Belgrade Road, like some mentioned. So, I had a rental available, 1 bedroom, there was a wait list, and 30 people needed it, and several of them have new jobs that they can't take because they can't live here. And our surroundings are the same. So we have to do something. If not this, what? And for that reason, I'm pro-housing. Almost or otherwise.
Commissioner Shreve? Final comments? Did the connection go out again? He's gone? Okay. Commissioner Peltz?
No further questions.
Okay. Commissioner, or Vice Chairman Garrison?
Yeah, this is a toughie, and I understand everything that everybody's saying, and I've been dealing with housing, mostly looking at workforce housing at that level for years now. And how do we fix this problem? We have such a lack of housing, as was said, in any price range whatsoever. And I really appreciate that we have organizations that are willing to step up and create transitional housing. The problem is we don't have a definition of transitional, and so at some point in time, this is going to become long-term housing. And getting back to what I said before, this is not a place that I would recommend or I would be looking to approve for an apartment complex to go into if this was being brought before the board as a build versus a remodel. You can't go anywhere right now without seeing people living out of their cars, living out of tents, living under bushes, panhandling on all the corners of Fry, Sharp, and Center right across the street. But I don't believe that this project is going to clean up one bit of that, unfortunately, because you're not looking at the same customer. You're looking at people who are going to go out and actually put themselves back into a work situation or whatever they're doing, and looking for what they would conceive of as short-term housing. So I appreciate what you're doing. I just don't believe this is the right place to put this. And if we just continue to give up a lot of our properties to be converted into transitional housing or short-term housing in this instance, at what point do we have anything left? And I think, like I said before, we have zoning and we have districts that were designed for a specific purpose, and changing them like this, regardless of the pressure we're under as a community to try and make things better for the people that you're serving and the people that live in our communities, I think there has to be a balance, and this just isn't part of that balance as far as I'm concerned. So I appreciate what you're doing. I just can't support it in this location.
I believe we got Commissioner Shreve back on the phone. Commissioner Shreve, do you have any final comments?
I believe in the project, not the location.
All right, so I guess I'm going to come out in opposition to some of my fellow commissioners. My feeling on this is that one of the roles for the Planning and Zoning Commission is in fact occasionally being flexible and changing the way that things are zoned. And that's in fact the entire purpose of a conditional use permit, is allowing some of these conditional uses, of which higher density housing is one in C2, as staff pointed out. And it is, as our city manager pointed out, an imperative for us to have more housing, especially more affordable housing. I have gone out of my way to read comments on the local newspaper articles, on local building projects, to see what the local citizens are saying. And every single project that gets published in our paper talking about building workforce housing, people cry out, I hope it's affordable. This needs to be affordable. Admittedly, this is a very specific kind of affordable, meant for a very specific kind of person, but it is desperately needed. And our one very small homeless shelter, even given the recent approval that this commission gave for them to do a little bit of building, is woefully inadequate for the needs of this community. I do not think that allowing longer term living in this location is going to be worse than having people living out of their cars on the street, which is the scenario that we are that we have right now. We literally have people living in their vans, and it feels like the question is, well, where do we put these people so that I don't have to see them? But guess what? They're part of the community too. And we have a responsibility as community leaders to give them a place to go. So I don't know if this is going to vote through tonight, but I hope that some of my commissioners reconsider their opinion. And with that, excuse me, just a second. I would like to entertain a motion, Mr. Vice Chair.
I don't have a motion.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion? You can make a motion in the negative, by the way. Motion to approve. So we have to vote either way.
Can we stipulate with the trash? So that's,
Yeah, yes, you can.
I could, well, okay, so I get what you're after. Yeah, I just don't know how I can make this motion as it's written, although I do understand what you're after.
Madam Chair, was there a motion made?
There has not been a motion made yet.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll make one. There is a motion to approve CUP 22-002 to allow the conversion of an existing 32-unit hotel into a transitional housing apartment complex, subject to the following stipulations. The project shall be developed in conformance with the site plan and letter of intent submitted with this application reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission on March 21st, 2022. The project shall be developed in conformance with Code Review Board requirements dated February 16, 2022. Parking for the project, including bicycle parking, shall be provided in conformance with zoning ordinance section 406. Parking and loading requirements as shown by the site plan with 37 spaces as approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The project shall remain in conformance with zoning ordinance section 407, landscaping requirements. A minimum 5 bicycle parking spaces shall be provided on site. The City of Cottonwood reserves the right to revoke the conditional use permit if the use creates an irremediable public safety problem as determined by the city. Were there any other stipulations? I didn't hear any in the discussion.
We were adding a stipulation about the trash. So,
So staff needs to revisit trash as the project evolves. How do you want to tackle that?
Staff, do you have any suggestions?
Madam Chair, the only thing I would say is we don't regulate in our code how many
the
trash enclosures, how many trash receptacles have to be on site. If it does become an issue, we have code enforcement that addresses it through those avenues.
Okay, so I think we're okay to leave it out.
Were there any other stipulations?
No.
That's all the ones
Okay.
that were presented at this time.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Do we have a second?
Oh, do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Peltz,
I'll vote to approve.
Commissioner Glasscock,
Approve.
Commissioner Shreve,
Nay.
Commissioner Kling,
I approve.
Vice Chairman Garrison,
No.
Chairwoman Maston.
Approve. Sorry, I am verklempt. That is two. Was 4 in favor?
Yeah.
4 in favor, approved. Next is Z 22-001. This is a request for a zone change for an, oops, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Next is CUP 10-014. It's a modification. It's a request for a conditional use permit modification for an expansion to Blazin' M Ranch's wedding venue and family fun park located at 1875 Mayberry Ranch Road.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, I'm Gary Davis with Community Development. This is a request for a modification of a previous conditional use permit for the Blazin' M Ranch property. It's located surrounded by state park property along the Verde River, which runs along the north side of the property, and is accessed by 10th Street and Mayberry Ranch Road past the state park entrance. Owner of the property is Mayberry Ranch Company LLC, and that is different from what is erroneously listed in your staff report, so make that note, please. Mayberry Ranch Property LLC. Property is 2 parcels consisting of a total of 8.3 acres. There was a use permit in the county, and that transferred over to the city when the property was annexed around 2002, 2003. In 2010, the city issued a new CUP for the existing facility, the performance venue, and the small western town concept there. The request is for a modification to allow an expansion of the existing entertainment venue type of use. We're viewing that as staff as an expansion, so it would require just a modification of the existing conditional use permit. Any different uses beyond this that go into other types of uses would require a planned area development rezoning. Site plan provided by the applicant shows the existing facility to the north of the parking lot. The parking lot would be surfaced. Over in the northwest side of the property would be a wedding venue facility with a tent facility, as well as a number of buildings supporting that. And towards the southeast, on the other side of the property by the parking lot, would be a family fun park, which has a lot of children's activities. More graphics provided by the applicant shows a parking lot with 107 stalls. The site plan calls out 111. I'm not sure which is the case, but it's approximately that number. And in addition, to the east, the applicant is negotiating with the state parks for another 40-some parking spaces in a field to the east on state land, state parks land. And this shows in purple a 20-foot fire access road that would access the wedding venue and loop around and come out, built to fire department specifications. Zooming in a little bit on the wedding venue, number of concept photos here that were provided by the applicant showing a tent, an open space where there would be a ceremonial grounds. There would be wagons for a bar and preparation, and some small sheds for storage to the east of the tent structure. On the family fun park to the south of the parking lot, there would be a number of things, including putt-putt golf and a climbing wall and a type of paintball called jelly ball. We did a little research on that because we had some concerns from surrounding property owners about possible noise with that. It's a small plastic gun, which is apparently not nearly as noisy and percussive as a paintball gun, geared more towards kids. I've specifically ran this by George Christensen of the state park to see if he had any concerns about the noise and the possible biodegrading of the little pellets that get shot, and he did not have any concerns at this location as long as it stays within the location that's provided on the site plan. Also, along the west side of the fun park area would be food concessions as well as porta-john facilities. Access to the facility is through the state parkland. It is from 10th Street north past the state park on up to Mayberry Ranch Road. This is the entrance to the property, which is the one and only private property on this stretch of road, surrounded again by the state park. This is looking straight west as you enter the property. The area in front of you would be the family fun park. This is looking to the northwest towards the existing uses. The wedding venue would be past the dark fence in the background. And then turning around, looking towards the southwest would be the family fun park area with radio-controlled cars and the jelly ball area. Proposed conditions, based on comments we had received regarding sound and also discussions with the applicant, we're proposing some different conditions, and I distributed a new list of conditions for the convenience of the maker of the motion, but also for reference here. Proposed conditions typically, as all conditional use permits are, we would require that they be developed in conformance with the site plan that's being presented here tonight, and that any additional expanded uses not approved as part of this modification would require an approval of a master development plan as part of the planned area development. Also, any special events such as outdoor concerts, other similar events, would be subject to a temporary use permit above and beyond the conditional use permit. The conditional use permit would be permanent and transferable. Project would be developed in conformance with the Code Review Board comments dated March 4th, 2022, which are in your packet. And if you've read through those, you can see there's a lot of very specific requirements that are placed on this by the fire department and by the building safety folks. That's in addition to the conditions here. Conditions here are mainly for the use itself, because this is the venue to decide on the use itself, the conditional use permit. Those specifics are also required too, so just so you know. Hours of operation should be limited to 9 in the morning to midnight. Any amplified sound outdoors ceases at 10 p.m. Amplified sound outside the barn building to cease at midnight. Any agreement with the state parks regarding overflow parking needs to be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to use of the overflow area. All outdoor lighting, as always, needs to conform with our dark sky ordinance, our zoning chapter 408 lighting requirements. Wedding venue tent shall not be in place for more than 180 days, and that's a building code requirement, but we also put it in here just so it's clear. Liquor license expansion for the wedding venue needs to be obtained prior to our issuance of certificate of compliance, or of occupancy rather. Design and surfacing the parking area should be in conformance with zoning ordinance 406 parking requirements. Those parking requirements do not necessarily involve a standard asphalt. There could be some sort of substitute surfacing as long as it is a hard surface and it does meet the standards of engineering and the fire department for access. A sign plan for the property, if there are going to be additional signs, needs to be submitted. All required county health services approvals of the restroom and food facilities need to be obtained as well prior to certificate of occupancy. Fire medical approvals of fire prevention measures need to be obtained. The two parcels need to be combined prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy, and that's because it's very awkward to try and issue a building permit on a facility that's straddling two different parcels. One might get sold out theoretically from one into the other one, so it's good to combine them. And also, the city of Cottonwood may revoke it if there's a irremediable public safety problem as determined by the city. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions of staff, and the applicant is here as well to answer more specific questions on the proposed operation.
Okay. Commissioner Glasscutt, any questions for staff?
On the 180 days, is that per a year's time frame, or is that in a succession, like a seasonal thing?
That would be a seasonal thing, Commissioner Glasscutt. No more than 6 months at a time.
Commissioner Kling?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Commissioner Shreve? Did we lose him again? No questions, I assume?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Peltz?
My question is about the river access. What kind of impact is that going to have on that river? Because I know a lot of people use it downstream, and their use of donut boats, it sounds cute, but what I look and see is that it's kind of like a party boat. So there could be a lot of trash, a lot of problems with just things getting into the river, and our water resources are tight as it is.
Okay.
So has the city or the building department looked at any of that, or had any comments on how that would be controlled, or how they were planning on developing that water use?
We have not, Commissioner Pels, Chairwoman Maston. We have, as I said, consulted with George Christensen at the State Park. He's not issued any objections to any of the proposed uses.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Garrison?
Yeah, I've got a couple. One is the proposed conditions aren't part of the stipulations presented, so how do we do that?
I'm not following you. These are the,
Those
we
don't
use the
match.
term conditions and stipulations kind of interchangeably sometimes. These are the proposed stipulations.
I was looking at the book, I forgot all about the extra
Yep.
sheets that we were handed.
Yep.
So I was trying to make them match up and they didn't. So I do have a question about the overflow parking. I've been down there to the venue and used it when the actual parking didn't accommodate the actual use. And now you're creating a whole lot of other uses. So a wedding venue would absolutely bring a lot of traffic. And we would expect the fun park section would also create some traffic. And I would assume that the applicant is not going to be shutting down the dinner wagon when they're doing these other activities. So I'm trying to make heads or tails of how we're going to have enough parking down there for all of these activities when there isn't currently enough parking. And it's looking like this overflow parking that's being shown on here is being put forward as a possible, if they can get a contract or some type of an agreement with the state park, but I'm not seeing that that's a condition of getting their permit. And so I'm wondering to what extent should we be making that a condition of them getting their permit, that they can actually increase their parking to accommodate all the use that's going to be added to this facility.
Right, Vice Chairman Garrison, Chairman Maston. Yes, that's a possibility to make the overflow parking subject to this approval rather than just prior to use of the overflow parking like you see in condition number 5 there. As to how the parking is going to work, our parking chapter does not specifically provide parking ratios for this type of use. It's kind of one of those unusual things that the parking chapter says if there's something that's not in the list, our parking schedule, that the Planning and Zoning Commission has the ability to determine whether it's adequate. And I would suggest speaking with the applicant on how that functions, how those uses overlap, how they plan on dealing with the parking, and how close they are to having the overflow parking.
I echo the Vice Chairman's question. Parking was my thing that I was just looking at. So with that, thank you very much. We'd love to speak to the applicant. Speak your name into the mic for the record, please.
Sure. My name is Ryan Glass. I'm one of the owners of the Blazing Ranch.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and let each of the commissioners ask you any further questions. But before I do, I believe you just heard the parking question, and please go ahead.
Sure, yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having us today and for considering this application. We appreciate it. We are new members of the Cottonwood community. As you know, the Mayberries, or may not know, the Mayberries did sell this last year after COVID. And we have been thoroughly enjoying being a part of the Cottonwood community, and we hope to continue to be great partners as we move forward. With that being said, we do recognize the need for parking. We actually added a third, it's very hard to see here, but there's a third row of parking down here that actually was just added as part of the expansion of this parking lot. So prior to this, we did not have 107 or 111 parking spaces. So we've actually gained several parking spaces by expanding this parking lot. We are planning to asphalt and pave it. So I know that's been a concern by some individuals. We have a concern about that too, because we have lots of local residents coming down our street and doing donuts in our parking lot, for which PD has been out to our lot several times. We've been in talks with George Christensen and Bob Broscheid of State Parks. They are very supportive of the Blazing M Ranch. We do bring appeal to this area and to Dead Horse State Park, and we hope to build that relationship over time. We do have a conditional understanding already with the parks, which allows us for $100 a day to basically rent this parcel of land from the state parks, about an acre. So we have that already in place, but we are looking to negotiate an additional longer-term lease, and we've talked with George about a month and a half ago, and we're still waiting to kind of hear back from them. But we believe that that will enhance our proposed availability of parking. So that's kind of the first thing.
Okay. Commissioner Glasscutt, any questions?
Yeah, in relation to, I mean, I love your place. I've been there. It's great. Thank you for reviving it. I mean, it's cool. If you're having a wedding at the same time as your public venue, how do you separate the two? Is there a way? Because if I'm in a wedding party, I don't want to mix with a bunch of people and kids.
Yes.
I got other things on my mind.
Yes, yeah. That is why we strategically did place it to the northwest of the property. Over here, there will actually be a fenced-off structure to the wedding venue, so that guests from...
Like a separate entrance.
Yes, a separate, exactly. So wedding guests will actually come through this pathway down to the property, and this will be closed for our main access point, which is here. But we don't plan, especially in the very beginning, to do a lot of double bookings, logistically and human resource-wise. It's not very possible right now. We are excited to be employers of currently about 25 employees, and we will be growing that to about 45 to 55 employees, as well as hopefully generating revenue, tourist revenue for the city. So we are, yes, it will be a separate entrance.
Commissioner Kling?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Shreve?
No questions.
Okay. Commissioner Peltz?
Mine again is about the use of the river and how you plan on monitoring that and keeping it safe and keeping it clean. And, because it's a viable source to this city and this area. I know a lot of people use it downstream from there. So I'm just kind of curious about with the donut boats that you're proposing, how would you keep that river safe? How would you keep it clean? How would you protect those people? And if that's accessed by the family gatherings, again, how do you keep that separate from the wedding parties? And then one other would be the parking with the existing restaurant or existing business there. What's your occupancy limit there on that parking? And are you increasing it to still support that plus all the other venue?
Sure. Multiple questions. I'll try to go in order there. So it is a good question. The donut boat's not a feature that we are necessarily very set on, first of all, but it is in our best interest to keep that river clean. It's a wedding venue, so we actually are going to be selling the venue and the environment to clients and customers. If it looks trashed, nobody's going to want to spend a lot of money on a wedding at our wedding venue. So it's in our best interest to keep that as clean as possible. The boats were simply more on an off weekend when we didn't have weddings. It's not meant to be like some rave party site. It was more meant as another fun water activity for community inhabitants to be able to come and do. We do imagine the ceremony venue, which is in the very northwest corner, to be sort of like a Sunday park where you could bring out a picnic, possibly listen to some small music, and that's why the stipulation there said outdoor concerts and other special events will be subject to a temporary use permit. So we would be applying for a temporary use permit, whether it be like outdoor movies or small concerts, nothing too big and extravagant because we understand our limitations on space. But again, we're friends of the Verde River. We know them very well. We've been working with them, and it behooves us to treat our water source with respect and the dignity it deserves.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairwoman.
It's fine.
So, first off, Chuck and the Mayberry family have done just a phenomenal job of building this venue and watching it grow through the years, and I really applaud you for stepping in and saving it, because there was obviously some issues that the family had, and the Verde Valley's become known for this venue, and so really appreciate that you've taken that on as your new mission to not only sustain it, but to grow it and make it more family oriented, and more commercially viable at the same time. And so I think you've done a great job of utilizing all that space. I'm really concerned about the parking, because the last thing you want to do is have a bride looking for a parking space. And you're going to be parking constrained. So as much as I hate to say that, I would prefer seeing an agreement made with state parks or state land before getting your permit to move forward with all the other amenities you want to add. I really believe that should be necessary to add that parking in the front instead of the back, and I realize that state bureaucracy at best does not move forward fast, so that'll be a problem. The other concern I have is I really hate seeing that line of porta-johns, and it just isn't saying river friendly, it isn't saying commercially friendly, it isn't saying family friendly. The last thing you want to do is send your your mother or your child into a porta-john when they're using the family area. Is there any movement being made to bring sewer to that property with the state park? Because I know that's been ongoing for years.
I'll be seeing you again shortly. No, yes, there was an IGA, intergovernmental agreement made between the Mayberries and Dead Horse State Park to allow a line to be constructed from our property to the Dead Horse lift station. That's going to cost a lot of money. We have to pay for it. So, I mean, unless, no, oh, okay.
So hopeful.
But no, in all seriousness, we are heavily looking at developing these 8.2 acres to the highest and best use. And yes, we agree with you that porta-johns are not a permanent solution. They're not a permanent solution in our opinion. Just so you are aware, Gary did go through it kind of rapidly, but the restrooms on the wedding venue here are they're prefab. They're like ultra luxury porta-johns, okay? And they will not have storage or holding tanks. We are proposing to run a line to a current septic system down in the south part of our property. And that's why that stipulation is made that before we get the conditional, the certificate of occupancy for the wedding venue, we will tie that into a septic here. Now for the concession area, yes, we're trying to get that on its feet as quickly as possible because as you may or may not know, this venue does not, people think it makes a lot of money. It does not, it costs a lot of money. And yeah, we are really hoping to open at least what we're calling the Be Wild Fun Park as soon as possible so that we can sustain ourselves moving forward. And as we develop perhaps in the southwest corner, we'd be considering that IGA to run a sewer line all the way to Dead Horse and then tie everything in so that we wouldn't need to use porta-johns anymore.
And so I'm going to stay on the parking issue for a minute, but I think my question's going to be more directed to the city manager and staff. Is there anything we can do as a commission to apply some pressure to the state park to move forward with the negotiations on this parking area because of the need that will be associated with that? That's not only in the applicant's best interest, but it's also in their best interest.
Commission woman and Vice Chairman. I don't even know how to say it. I'm so confused.
I'm going to put that on a t-shirt now.
Yeah, we can get involved. We can reach out to the state park directors. We interacted with them early in the transition when the Mayberries were originally thinking about selling it. So we can absolutely work with George and the director to see if we can make any leeway. I did make sure you guys heard they have to pay for it, but sounds like they have daily access to that when they need it. Costs $100 a day, and I'm sure that's not profitable, but at least they can do that to begin with. And I've already reached out to my economic development director. So there are actually infrastructure grants, not the city. When there's job creation, I thought I heard a count of 25 new jobs. Now there's probably other requirements, living wage, blah, 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 but we'll look into a grant for the infrastructure for the septic or the sewer connection. Again, I don't know that he qualifies or the project qualifies, but Tricia's on it.
Thank you very much.
That's good to hear.
Could I address one more thing on the parking? Because I do agree, we don't want to have a parking issue either. The hours of operation for the fun park right now are scheduled from 9 a.m., actually probably a little later for the later risers, but like 10 a.m. till 4 p.m., okay? Then the Be Wild Fun Park would close, and that would allow guests to leave. And then our evening guests come in at 5 o'clock, and we don't usually have anybody coming before 4:45 into our parking lot. So we've allowed an hour to create ingress and egress for the family fun park so that it runs as a separate venue and it does not overlap. That's specifically also why we have not installed lighting on that park. So we won't operate it past 4 p.m., at least definitely in the beginning or until we get more parking, because we don't want to have that issue.
Will you be operating that park on a daily basis or just the weekend, Friday through Sunday?
Friday through Sundays. and potentially not even Friday in the beginning. Our plan right now is Saturdays and Sundays.
Personally, my questions have been answered. Thank you very much. I'm now opening the floor to the public. Does anyone have any comments for or against this project? And sir, have you filled out thank you very much. It's the rules. The city manager will
I've
take
done
it.
school board for many years, and
Can you introduce yourself,
my
please?
name's Toby Payne, and I owned Stage Sound Audiovisual America for 38 years and have toured with sound equipment and lighting and staging, and from the World's Fair to Telluride Bluegrass to Boulder, Colorado with their sound ordinance. And I came to Gary and spent time with them, and I have to commend staff on what they've put into this from our meeting. Thank you. I really appreciate it. The one thing that a couple of things that I'd like to point out. I'm not negative against this, I'm on that, but it's not part of your entertainment district. Does this set a precedent? Just a question. Because you've got your entertainment corridor. Does this set you up for anything else? I don't know. Somebody needs to follow up on that. The notification to community was 300 foot. That only entailed the state parkland. Should you be communicating to community further out? Sound does not stop at the property line or 300 foot. So and the other thing I haven't heard addressed is wedding events. On the fact of, I've heard the child park or the entertainment park, and I've heard about the main venue, which I totally support. It's been there for years, it's great. But when you get into the wedding events, are they going to overlap? That should be addressed. Just my comments, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm actually going to call the applicant back to ask that question about the wedding overlap. How are you planning on dealing with that?
Initially, the plan is to not overlap events. We would like to become a venue, like holding a 200-person wedding would put too much strain on both properties to be open at the same time, and we would not look to do that. Like I said, I don't believe we will have the capacity in our restaurant or commercial kitchen facilities to do that. However, if there was a smaller business-like conference, let's say for a business that was coming to Cottonwood to hold a retreat or something like that, right? And it was 50 or 60 guests. They could easily be in their tent doing a meeting that has very limited sound, not a party, not a huge wedding thing. I do wonder if we could then do both if we're not plating food, right, and serving a big meal for those individuals. But for the purposes of the immediate first year, we're not looking to do two on the same Saturday.
And all of those events would require a temporary use permit, right? That's a question for staff. No?
Madam Chair, it depends on the event, so any of the outdoor concerts or similar events that are not held indoors or part of what they're proposing tonight is going to be subject to that temporary use permit.
So just a clarification for myself. So anything in a tent, is that considered outdoor or indoor? Because it seems like that sets whether it needs a permit.
More times than not, it's outdoors.
Okay. Thank you very much. Did anyone else in the public have any comments for or against the project? All right, I don't see anyone, so I'm closing the floor to the public. I'm going to go ahead and give the commission an opportunity to share their thoughts on the project. Commissioner Glasscutt?
Yeah, I like the idea. I think it'll brings a nice new element to the area, especially utilizing that wedding venue. I think it's a definite plus to the area. I do agree the parking should be addressed as well as I like that you said that there's not going to be an overlap of things because there could be a mix of families and wedding guests, and that could cause issues. So those are my comments.
Commissioner Kling?
Thank you. I mean, as a wedding venue, I agree with the parking concern is definitely an issue, but keeping it at capacity to a smaller size, I mean, most wedding venues do have a set capacity of guests you can have. So I think that's one way to stipulate it. I've actually been in the luxury porta-johns. My cousin had a wedding on her property. She didn't want people in her house. It had creek access, and you know, to be able to use the dump station potentially at the state park, you know, to avoid the porta-johns, because those are concerning with kids and such. I mean, you do have restrooms there now for the restaurants that are detached, which could be an option. Yeah, I think it has a lot of opportunity. Some things to tweak, but otherwise in favor.
Okay. Commissioner Shreve, any comments?
I'm struggling with my audio, so I'm going to have no comments at this time.
Oh. Commissioner Peltz?
No further comments.
And Vice Chair?
Yeah, just a few. I really appreciate that you're thinking ahead when it comes to specifically the sanitary issues that you're going to have not only with the current with the wedding venue, but with the park as well. And I would really, I think the city staff will go well out of their way to helping you find any available funding whatsoever to help get that line up there as quickly as possible, because I think not only are you constrained with what you're currently doing, but any future build out you have for all that area there where you've got your loop going around, that's going to be a prime area, and you can't develop that without some more capacity. So I think it would behoove you to sow those seeds now so you can reap the rewards later. So I think the staff could be very, very helpful in helping you attain some of those funds, even if it's some grant loans or whatever. I think it would be to your benefit. I can tell you with, as the audience member pointed out, the sound, one of the biggest issues with Alcantara out, and they're right on the river, and they're now in Camp Verde where they weren't before, but one of the biggest problems with that wedding venue was they tend to happen at dusk, and during the evening hours you have a very large outdoor area where people will convene and party and drink, and when you start drinking you get very much louder, and music gets louder, everything gets louder, because everybody's enjoying the camaraderie of being in an event, especially something like a wedding. So everything across the river is, once you get past that greenbelt section, is all very dense housing, and so I know we can hear down here sitting on my patio, we can hear the ball games going, and you're half the distance from the ball games. So I know we're going to hear that noise down here, so I can only imagine what the residents are going to have to deal with also. So I would love to see staff somehow, and I noticed that's not really in the conditions here, but at some point there may be a need to go back and revisit whether that venue is creating noise issues for the area. I would prefer not to put that burden on them right away, but I think at some point in time, as this becomes more popular, which I think it absolutely will, it'll be a bigger concern. I love the venue. I really like that you're thinking forward and you're really looking for ways to sustain this whole property and the activity, and it's a real feather in the cap for the community, so I appreciate what you're doing. I'm a little nervous about some of those issues, and don't want you to have those problems as well as the town by doing it, but otherwise I like what you're doing.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, if I can address your comment on the sound. We do include adherence to code review comments. One of the code review comments from the police department is that they are within the city's noise ordinance. So this approval, if it is approved by the commission, doesn't allow them to now go and exceed those ordinances, those sound levels.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will just echo the other commissioners. I tend to agree. I understand the concerns regarding parking, and I understand the concerns regarding noise. I do see here that one of the stipulations is that outdoor sound, amplified outdoor sound cease at 10 p.m., which I think is reasonable. Maybe less so for your wedding guests, but they'll be okay. And then obviously, you have to follow the existing rules. So with that said, I think that we are now at a point where I would entertain a motion. Mr. Vice Chair, if you'd like to make one.
I move to approve a modification of CUP 10-10014 to allow additional entertainment activities at an existing event center subject to the following stipulations, which would replace the previous stipulations. The project shall be developed in conformance with the site plan and letter of intent submitted with this application and approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission on February 28, 2022. Any additional or expanded uses not approved as part of this modification will require approval of a master development plan as part of a planned area development rezoning. Outdoor concerts and other similar special events shall be subject to temporary use permit. The conditional use permit shall be permanent and transferable, with the applicant to notify staff in writing prior to transfer. The project shall be developed in conformance with the Code Review Board comments dated March 4th, 2022. Hours of operation shall be limited from 9 a.m. to midnight, and any amplified sound outdoors shall cease at 10 p.m. Amplified sound inside barn building to cease at midnight. Any agreement with state parks regarding overflow parking shall be submitted for staff review and approval prior to use of overflow area. All outdoor lighting shall conform to zoning ordinance chapter 408 lighting requirements. The wedding venue tent shall not be in place more than 180 days per annum. Is that what you're saying? Per year?
It was seasoned before.
It was seasoned. It was seasoned.
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, per 12 months, seasonal per 12 months.
Per year.
Per,
Okay. Liquor license approval for the wedding venue shall be obtained prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy. Design and surfacing of the parking area shall be in conformance with zoning ordinance section 406 parking requirements. A sign plan for the property complying with zoning ordinance section 405 signs shall be submitted, and sign permit approval prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy. All required Yavapai County Health Services approvals of restrooms and food service facilities shall be obtained prior to certificate of occupancy. All required fire medical department approvals of fire prevention measures shall be obtained prior to certificate of occupancy. The two parcels shall be combined prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy. The City of Cottonwood may revoke the conditional use permit if the use creates an immediate or irremediable public safety problem as determined by the city. I heard no other conditions.
Can I get a second?
I second.
All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Peltz,
I approve.
Commissioner Glasscott,
I approve.
Commissioner Shreve,
I approve.
Commissioner Kling,
I approve.
Vice Chairman Garrison,
yes.
Chairwoman Maston.
Aye.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Good luck and Godspeed. All right, next up, now we have Z22-001. So this is going to be a request for a zone change for an existing automotive repair facility with a dual zoning designation. So I'm sure we're about to hear all about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. As you stated, this is a rezone application, zoning 22-002, for a property at 1151 East State Route 89A. Currently, there is an existing automotive facility there. In discussions with the property owner and the applicant, when he was looking at what could potentially be his property be used for. As you see, there's a split zoning designation. The front 200 feet of the property is zoned C1, and the rear is zoned AR 43. So this zone change, in essence, is a cleanup of a situation so that he will ultimately end up with one zoning designation. His request is for a rezoning to C2, which brings him more in line with the uses of an automotive repair facility. It did receive a conditional use permit back in 1995 for the current facility that is there now, but that limits what he could do as far as an automotive repair facility, which if they were to come in today, we would most likely direct him to the C2 zoning designation for the uses on site. In conjunction with the zoning, there's also the general plan designation underneath. It has the same boundary difficulties. We're not bringing a general plan amendment to you. In this case, there are provisions in minor, there are exceptions in minor situations like this where the predominant zoning and land use designation would then take effect for the entire property. So this is only the zone change request for the application. So as you see the existing site, there are no changes being proposed to the layout, to the uses. It does give them, with the C2, all the rights of what would be permitted in the C2. If they do come forward with additional uses, it would be looked at by building department, code review, health, fire, anybody else. So here's some pictures of, this is the building that is currently on site. Basically, 89A is behind. Across the street, looking across 89A is a car wash and fast food facility. And to the rear is a small section of vacant land that belongs to the adjacent property owner to the east. This is the property, also zone C2 on the east side. Property to the west is, there are a couple of them. There's a used car sell-it-yourself lot and a single-family residence located more towards the rear of the parcel. Looking west on 89A and looking east on 89A. So that concludes my comments. I would point out that there are no transitional housing uses proposed with this, nor family fun park.
You watch out, you won't go home for an hour.
Are associated with this zone change.
Thank you very much.
Okay. The applicant is here
Okay.
as well this evening.
All right.
Should you have any questions?
Do any of the commissioners have questions for staff about this one? Yes.
Not questions so much as comments. So back in the day, this was all AR 43. And the reason you have this split zoning, this isn't a cleanup. That ban was placed there intentionally. And the idea was that it would keep the commercial from bleeding over into the very low density residential space. And so that was the intended purpose of that zone, to go back down through there. But as you can see, it's been removed on almost that entire block at this point. And it all started with Goy property down here behind the AutoZone. So that's where it all started. To me, it gets back to what you said. It's just a cleaning up. Obviously, there's not a lot of people here complaining about it. You would think that immediate neighbors, if they had a concern, they would be here. It's being used this way currently. I don't see this being a detriment to anybody except the property owner themselves, and what they want to do with it, I think it's perfectly acceptable. So I just wanted to point out the reason that happened, because that was done back in, I believe, the 70s. So.
That's interesting. Commissioner Peltz, it looks like you have a comment.
I have one question. In the request, they talk about a paint booth. And knowing that these are AR-43 in residence and being involved and being around body shops, I know the odor can be intense. And my concern is, do we have ordinances on that, on what type of filtration system or what kind of stipulations we'd have? Because I know that's what was brought up, is could they have a paint booth in this?
Any potential additional uses that they're proposing on site, they would need to submit their application, go to the code review board. That would be reviewed by the building department, fire department, health department, planning, utilities, all the different departments to look at and place any specific conditions that would be required, as you suggested, to deal with the odor, any sound, whatever the additional uses might be. So those would be reviewed at the code review board and placed through, a building permit process.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Shreve, I didn't hear if you had any comments.
I have to agree with Commissioner Peltz. I would be concerned about the residents to the west. I have a auto body shop next to one of my restaurants, and the smell is offensive and strong. So, do we have any information on where that paint booth would be, where it would be located? Is it a separate building? Is it part of the existing building? But I'm looking at the site plan, and it looks like a westerly wind would bring all of those paint fumes right to that house.
What we are looking at this evening is a zone change request. I think we're a step ahead of ourselves with looking at what building permit issues may arise in the future, but this is simply a rezoning request for C1 and AR-43 to C2.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so Commissioner Shreve, to just rephrase that a little bit, if and when the applicant decides that, or the property owner decides that they want to build a booth or whatever they decide, it's going to have to go through the whole process again. So we'll have the opportunity at that point to make sure that anything that could be a problem for the neighbors would be addressed.
I would be in favor of the zone change to clean up the property. It shouldn't have two zones within the same property line.
Thank you. I think that is it for staff. You can probably sit if you want. And the applicant is here. Do any of the commissioners have questions for the applicant? All right, that sounds good to me. All right, so I'm gonna do a quick call to the public. It doesn't look like anyone here is gonna make comments. No? All right, closing the floor to the public. So last chance to make comments. Commissioner Glasscott? I'm good. Commissioner Kling?
I'm good. I mean, as proposed, no comments, but I would not approve a paint booth next door. I've lived down on front and back here.
Yeah. Commissioner Shreve, any final comments?
No final comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Peltz?
No final comments.
Vice Chair?
No, ma'am.
All right. I also don't really have any comments. This is a straightforward zone cleanup. So with that said, I believe we're ready to entertain a motion.
I move to recommend approval to the City Council Z22-001 to change the zoning designation to C2 heavy commercial, subject to the following stipulation. The requested zoning approval is for the .76 acre site to accommodate one single zoning designation for the entire parcel. Any future development or modifications of the C2 parcel will require an appropriate review process as determined by staff. And I heard no other conditions.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Commissioner Kling seconds. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Peltz?
I approve.
Commissioner Glasscott?
Approve.
Commissioner Shreve?
I approve.
Commissioner Kling?
I approve.
Vice Chairman Garrison?
Yes.
Chairwoman Maston?
I approve. All right, all in favor, unanimously carried. Thank you very much. We are rezoned. And now, So I believe that we do have some discussion items as well.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commission, thank you. First item on there is a ordinance amendment for attendance for the commissioners. Within section 104, it does state in there the attendance requirements for commissioners of Planning and Zoning Commission. You can miss up to 3 regular meetings or a total of 5 regular and special meetings in a calendar year. If you hit those numbers or exceed those numbers, you can be removed. You'd have to write to the council on why you should be reinstated versus your seat just becoming open. Hasn't happened a lot, but it has happened a few times or a couple times in the last several years where we've had to remove commissioners for that reason. We were looking to make a change to the Historic Preservation Commission attendance to match the Planning Commissions. When we took that to council, they brought up the idea of having excused absences so that not just any absence counts against you. Especially in this day and age, if there's a family emergency, if somebody's sick, that absence shouldn't count against you as one of your 3 or total 5 being removed from the commission. So we're here to get suggestions from the commission. We're hoping to bring something back to you in April to suggest to council after that on what those excused absences should look like. Right now, we're thinking exactly kind of what I just said. Health issues, family emergencies, anything more than that can be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
I mean, that seems fair to me.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I just want people to attend.
And what are you talking, 5 times potentially out of a 12-month year? And that's after the event.
Right. And that, right now, it's 5 special or regular meetings, and if you miss 3 regular meetings, or more than 3 regular meetings, then that's cause for removal. That 5 includes now special meetings. So if you were to miss 3 regular meetings and then 2 special meetings, now you've hit your 5, so.
Thank you for clarification.
So this one's always touchy for me, you know, because I think this is a very important commission. I think what we do shouldn't be taken lightly, and so that's why sometimes we get into these protracted discussions and disagreements, or not necessarily seeing eye to eye on everything, is because what we do is valued, I believe, and when you apply for these boards and you assume the responsibility of being a commissioner, I think that comes with some weight, and I think you should fully be prepared to uphold your end of the bargain if you're chosen, because other people weren't, sometimes. So, that being said, I do understand that things happen, and we had issues in the time that I've been here where commissioners weren't able to make it because of sickness and health issues and whatnot, but I think it becomes sticky when you start trying to decide what's an excused absence and what isn't, and as was pointed out, if you miss 3 meetings without an excuse, that's 25% of our meetings for the year, and typically I would say special meetings aren't a regular thing, so you can't really add those into the mix. So while I'm all for giving people the opportunity to deal with their issues and still fulfill their role here, I'm worried about making things so loose that we no longer seem valuable and their attendance no longer seems valuable. So, that being said, why do we have 7 commissioners? Why do we not have 5? We seem to be able to fill 5 seats rather easily. Why do we have 7? Because well, we're talking about attendance.
I'll just speak a little bit. When I first started on the commission, I think that there actually were a full 7. And I believe it is helpful for discussions. You get more points of view. There is a little bit more opportunity actually for disagreement, because I find that when the commission is smaller, it's very easy for 1 or 2 people to passionately disagree, and sometimes those disagreements are really important. Even if I'm on the side of like wanting them to lose, it's still important that they're aired. It's really important that we discuss all sides of all the issues that we face, and I think that a larger commission helps facilitate that, so that's kind of why.
I was just looking at more from the ability to make a quorum consistently.
Oh. Yeah.
With a commission of 7, you potentially make it easier to get that quorum versus 5. If you only have 5, it doesn't take many to be absent. But as Mr. Corbin said, it's not technically on the agenda, so we can't go into full discussion on that. I do get your point to it, but really we want your thoughts on the attendance and what that should look like.
Madam Chair, and if I can add, if you don't like our recommendations, if Mr. or Vice Chairman was mentioning that not to change the current scenario where we don't create this, you just tell us what you want to recommend. I think they're taking this to HPC, and eventually they'll take something back to council. Council may decide to create the excused absence, but we're not trying to tell you what to recommend to us. That's just our starting point. So whatever pleases this commission is what we'll move forward with.
What would
Does council have a deal like this as well, where we get missed 3?
No, they're elected, and so it's a little harder to remove an elected official. No, they can. No comment.
What would the commission think about having, this is throwing spaghetti against the wall, but about having actually 1 less absence allowed? Like, you can have 2 unexcused, but 4 total if 2 are excused. Does that make sense? Like, we'd actually be removing an absence, like for someone just not showing up, unless they have an excuse. And then we'd have to really like codify what those are. Like, it would have to be like a death in the family, like illness, like it'd have to be very codified. But that way, maybe, I'm just trying to think of ways to impart the seriousness of attendance to people, because Commissioner Garrison's right, or Vice Chair Garrison's right. We have had people who haven't taken attendance seriously enough. So anything to get that message across. That's just kind of an idea.
Well, I think it's hard to say, I don't believe in permissible excuses. I mean, something can happen. You get a flat tire on the way here. I mean, but you also know this is once a month, every 3rd Monday of the month. If you're going to be traveling, you should be able to give that notice or come by phone. Since that's available. I mean, being excused would be, you're on your deathbed, in my humble opinion, or you're not in cell service.
So I guess my comment to council, because you're taking this back to the council for their decision one way or the other, or at least our discussion would be that we don't necessarily view our attendance any less serious than they view theirs. And so, you know, whatever they do, we would appreciate it if they would take that in consideration.
I think it's a good way to put it.
I would comment, I mean, I think that's a very fair as proposed. My challenge is the special meetings. They're a little harder to plan for. So short of being on my deathbed, I could always attend via phone, but the issue is childcare. So these random things, being only in town a little bit, like, even, like, I pretty much have these meetings covered, but the random meetings are a struggle at times. But, I mean, there's no excuse for not calling in, not trying to.
Yeah, is by phone considered attending?
Yes.
Okay.
But the special meetings are not always an option to jump in that way is the issue, I think. I know there's been a few that's just not an option. But, I mean, I think it's very serious to attend, so. I don't have any objections, but that's the only.
I mean, childcare is a legitimate thing to bring up, and you are right. Like, sometimes, I mean, I think staff always gives us a 30-day notice, but even with it, it can be challenging.
As far as the commissioners attending by phone,
Phone is fine.
it's an option,
May I
but it
step in,
becomes,
because I'm attending by phone currently?
it becomes an issue when you have
The phone
multiple.
thing really doesn't work. I'm hearing about every fourth word, and it's a real struggle. I've got 2 laptops going, one video and one for the agenda, and I'm like, I got headphones on, and I apologize. I'm out of state and have been the whole month. A business opportunity came up here that I had to entertain, and I really do take this seriously and want to be involved. But I will say that remotely, it doesn't work very well, and I would much prefer to be in person, and I will be moving forward. And again, I apologize. I missed the last 2 meetings, and I'll do a better job moving forward.
Well, thank you, Commissioner.
There is a lag time with those. I mean, it's a delay, and it's like, are you paying attention? Are you
Yeah,
not?
I can't hear anybody's comments back at all.
Right there.
As far as the phone goes, though, too, we can't have multiple commissioners on the phone. It just doesn't work like that. At most, I would say 2 at a time.
You can't bring a cutout somewhere, so.
So I remember when COVID first started, and I feel like now it's getting off topic, actually. I'm going to retract that. I'll talk to you about it later. I was going to ask questions about Zoom.
No.
Fair. So I think that that's a good summation. I think that Vice Chair Garrison's summation for council is good to take, unless any of the commissioners disagree. And I think that there was another discussion item about the height of fences, proposed changes in the code.
Madam Chair, Commission, we have been approached to potentially look at changing the code, excuse me, to allow full height fences. So right now, fence heights can go up to 6 feet is a standard approval on a fence in side yards, rear yards, even more recently on a corner lot. It's been asked to look at the potential for allowing that now up to the property line on the front yard. Right now, we allow up to 4 feet if it's solid. We changed that recently from 3 foot solid and 4 foot see-through to 4 foot regardless if it's solid or see-through. Now, the question is, can we do 6 foot solid all the way up into the front yard? Here's some examples of fences that are in the front yard on that front property line. That's what you get when you have that see-through, when you're not solid. You still get that view. It's a combination there of a little bit of both. Then we've got some examples of what it could potentially look like when you go 6 feet. That's a 4 foot on the side yard there.
So you're talking any type of fence, chain link?
Any type of fence, doesn't matter what it is, if it's see-through or solid, 6 foot high in the required front yard, which, depending on the zone, could be anywhere from 10 feet to 50 feet. That's, so just to point out, this is an example of, this is a corner lot, so this is technically the side yard, but since we don't allow 6 foot fences in the front yard, this is what we have to show you that comparison of what it could potentially look like. So if this wasn't a corner lot and this street didn't exist right here, and that's a front yard, it's what you're gonna see is a 6 foot fence in the front yard.
So their front yard is by code lower than their side yard fence?
their front yard is around the corner here. This is just their side yard, but for argument's sake, this is their front yard. If this was their front yard, that's what a 6-foot fence at the property line could look like. And again, with that one as well. So those two fences are allowed because this is not their front yard. But if you picture that being the front yard, that's what you could see.
Well, I mean, if I own a property, I'd kind of like my fence to be the same height all the way around the property. Even if it's leveled, I like it to be congruent, I guess.
So the
What you're
potential.
saying is if you can have one side of the house 6 feet and the front has to be lower than 6 feet?
Yeah, that's the current.
Within the front
Yeah.
yard setback, yes. If you're behind the front yard setback, you can have it at 6 feet.
And what's the reason?
That property on screen right now looks terrible. I'm totally against that. We're gonna have Phoenix. If we allow that, we're gonna have people that have fortresses and the whole sense of community goes away. I am 100% against that. I was on the architectural committee years ago in Sedona in my subdivision, and they tried to do this, and I fought it with tooth and nail because once you let one person do it, next thing you know, our streets look like Phoenix, and I think it's a bad way to go.
Passion.
Depends on what the property looks like behind it.
Well, but that's the problem.
Well, it's really hard.
They hide it. Is that
Well, no, you can't determine one property versus another, so when you
Yeah.
make a rule, it's good for everybody.
And I think that's part of Commissioner Shreve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's part of your point is that once something is allowed, you can't prescribe it based on individual uses. I will say that I tend to lean in favor of increasing fence heights myself but that comes from a place of self-determination. Like, I really think, like, within reason, homeowners in general should be allowed to do basic things on their property to their tastes, including fence heights, as long as, there's nothing, like, heinous about the fence. I do understand, though, that this is a sticky issue, so it is, I would suggest that there are some neighborhoods where this is more appropriate in Cottonwood than others. And I think that this could be stipulated based on something more specific than just citywide.
As you said, Commissioner Matson, you can't prescribe it. So if you change the ordinance, and I think it's always been, you can have 6 feet to the face of your house. So, for example, the front wall of your house facing your street, from that point forward towards the street, I think we have a 3 foot, I don't know what it is currently, but I assume it's 3 foot. It could go to 4, but certainly not 6. Because you've got other issues. You've got fire and police issues. The police come on scene to a domestic dispute on this property and they can't see what's going on. It's a fortress.
But if it's chain link, it doesn't matter.
But they're asking for solid,
So
not screened.
for privacy reasons primarily?
Also noise sometimes. It depends on where it is.
That's a tough call because I like my privacy, but you also lose the curb appeal because you look like you're just behind a fence. I can't tell.
So you go down to Mexico and you see this all the time. And what you end up with is a neighborhood full of lots of little teeny Fords.
Yeah.
And it's not friendly, it's not neighborly,
It's not engaging.
it's not open and friendly. It just becomes, and so if you want to put your fence up at your front of your house and make your whole backyard and your side yards private, then that's okay. But I know back in the day there was some properties down on, I believe it's Cochise or Coconino, maybe Keeler, Graham, down in that area, and they had 6-foot wood fence out front, and the fire department finally had to get in the middle of it because it became a safety issue. Not only that, is the fence was only 5 feet from the house, and so what are you really hiding, with the 6-foot fence in the front yard besides the house? So, I agree with Commissioner Shreve. I don't think it makes for a beautiful or pretty neighborhood or a good neighbor, and I think our zoning ordinance as is okay. If they wanted to go 6 foot, I would even have probably a little bit of heartburn if you made the top 2 feet see-through. That would be probably the next step before you went to a completely 6-foot screened area, but even at that, I don't think it really, I think it's just gonna really detract and deter the look and the curb appeal of the neighborhood. I think we go to a lot of effort in this group and the different projects that we bring in for approval to prescribe the ways they landscape their property. And this completely gets rid of the whole landscaping portion of any approval process, because like, take the gas company, they could have gone in and put up a 6-foot fence completely around their property, on their property line, and turn the whole place into a yard, and that wouldn't be a good neighbor or look good. So I think things have gone far enough as the way they are currently, and I'm not really in favor of going for a 6-foot screen. But.
So they have the opportunity, like he said, to do their backyard and for privacy reasons?
Correct. Anything behind the front property, the front
setback, right? Yeah.
And which is, in most cases, R1 properties are 25 feet. So in front of that, 4 foot, behind that, anywhere 6 feet. That's our current code.
Could we require a conditional use permit for a fence over 4 feet? Like, could we have people apply and go through design review?
We have tons of people doing it.
That's true.
I'm building a house and I'd love to have a tall fence. But I also see the understanding of knowing that safety comes first when it comes to our public servants. The fire department, the police force, those coming to those situations could be the most dangerous when they can't see what they're going into. You can have that privacy you want, as they're stating, with that 25-foot setback. It still gives them a chance to do a nice yard. They still have that 4-foot yard, that 4-foot fence that's just been approved to be very decorative, very attractive. You can block in your front yard, not totally blocking it into where you can't see. Then they can put their fence right up against the side of their home, having a perfectly private backyard, and still keeping in the looks of the neighborhood. Because like that fence up there is just crazy on the corner because there's just too many possibilities. I mean, especially with young kids today, the way they drive, that's a hazard. I mean, you can't see around it, you can't see what's going on. You just know that that's what you get to look at every time you drive by that. Now, I don't think it should change. I think that the 4 foot is adequate enough for the property line, and if they want anything higher, they go back to that 25-foot setback. Because it's still giving them the privacy. It's giving them what they need. It's giving them what if they need it in their back, but in the front, well, again, I'm kind of what the commissioner was talking about in Sedona, where they stopped that because of what it would do to the city. You wouldn't have that openness.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody would be doing that. That's a huge desire for a lot of people. And if I could do it, it'd be a cinder block wall with glass on top and my contact.
I would, well, see, that's what I'm thinking. Like, in full disclosure, like I have, so right now, I'm just gonna talk about my own house as an example. So there's a large picture window. So our bedroom is in the front half of the floor plan. And there's a large picture window, which, I mean, of course, we can have, blinds, and we do. We're not like bad people. We have blinds, but it's facing, it's a cul-de-sac, but it's facing the street. And it would be very nice to have like a 5-foot fence, not a wall, but like a fence, just to give a little more privacy. So I'm very empathetic to it, but I also understand that people will take advantage of it and they will literally put up walls. Like, so I'm torn in my selfishness. Like,
I've seen some of the walls that you're talking about in front of rooms. I don't know where the street is, but they've done it kind of like an artsy kind of thing, where they're individual panels that sit in the yard and they're facing different directions.
Yeah.
It gives them that privacy on the front part of their home, but it's further back into the yard.
yeah.
And I could see that being acceptable as long as it's just not right on that property line.
Madam Chair, I don't want to keep us here any longer. and
Sorry.
We can bring something back. I appreciate it. The one thing that I didn't hear a lot about tonight, though, is animals. And there are some animals at 4 feet's not tall enough to keep them in. Some people don't have the size of a backyard that others have. So we'll take mostly this negative, the no, and see if there's anything we can come out of it. But the animal thing is one thing that I have concern. I actually live on that street. And that block wall is actually one of the better looking block walls I've seen. They've painted it, they've done some work, so they did a good job on it. But there's a lot of 4-foot fences on that yard that when we walk our dog, we feel vulnerable. The fences don't seem like they can keep those aggressive dogs inside the yard. Again, if it's a weak 6 foot, not gonna help us at all either. But as a walker in that neighborhood on that one slide, that's my safest house to walk past. The other ones that have dogs are actually across the street and 1 or 2 properties down. 4-foot fences, those dogs have their paws on the top of those fences. And I don't feel very safe with me and my dog on leash walking down that, nor does my wife. Just something to think about there. Again, I agree. I don't want a bunch of glass-covered cement fences in our community with a bunch of forts. Couldn't agree more with that, but it's just something else to think about.
Like you said, the wrought iron on top of that 4-foot fence up to 6 would.
It might, if it has to be see-through, it would be enough to keep an animal in, but not create the same kind of view. So maybe we can work on something about that top 2 foot.
Yeah. So what you used to have for your 4 foot that you just got rid of, but just taking it up to 6 foot, say, okay, so you can do 6 foot, but it has to be
Remaining 2 feet have to be
see-through.
Again, commission seems divided on this. We're gonna
Yes.
go back and work on this and bring it back now that you've given us something to think about. Mr. Ellis, is that?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
I noticed they took all the pictures right around your house.
Now we know.
They're all like within 20 feet of each other.
In all transparency, this did not come from me. This was not my request.
No, it did
This
not.
isn't you trying to
It
get people
did
to put
not.
their dogs away?
I just happen to know about the block wall, so that's where we got the picture.
Okay. All right, if there are no further comments about the discussion items, I am going to, my notes are asleep, so I'm going to say we are adjourned. Thank you.